Hi gang, Rob here. It's the morning of 21 November 2015 and I've got a review I've kind of been anticipating for a while for you today on a traditional pocket knife. This thing was released, I think early to mid 2015, and it is kind of special. It's a cold steel. Yeah, you heard right. It is a cold steel traditional pocket knife. It's called the Ranch Boss. And it's kind of one of very few knives in what I think is going to become a trend in the traditional pocket knife world. It is a little pricey, a little more expensive than most traditional pocket knives. It's going to run, between $175 and $200, but depending on where you can get it. Why? It doesn't look like anything that special, does it? Well, because the blades are see if you can pick this up. Yeah, there you go. They're made of Crucible CPM S35 VN. And this trend I'm referring to is just that. Traditional pocket knives made to high levels of precision using materials that are, sort of more normal in the modern folder world. And this, the blade tang of this spay blade is stamped, or actually engraved, 223. So it's number 223 out of 600 pieces total. And Cold Steel markets this as a limited production 2015 model Ranch Boss. Before we start getting into dimensions and critiques, let me sort of explain to you the origin of this knife and why it might be kind of special despite some quality issues, drawbacks, negatives. So here's why. First of all, it's the only knife of this kind Cold Steel has ever brought to market. I think they've made some traditional looking knives in the past at much lower price points, not nearly as high a quality product. This, is stepping right up to the plate. You bring a large 3-blade Stockman traditional pocket knife to the market and ask a couple $100 for it, it makes people's eyebrows go up, doesn't it? Especially without any exotic handle material. This is just what Cold Steel calls amber bone stag. Now, Queen markets a cover material called stag bone, which I think is maybe a little more honest. The last word in the string being the actual material. So what it is, it's a bone cover that is jigged to look like an antler. Nothing wrong with that. It's still a very fine cover material. I just think their wording is a little curious, especially in their marketing copy where they say something like, "Yes, you heard that right." Well, it's not stag, it's cowbone. So, other than the steel, nothing exotic here. Nickel silver throughout, pins, liners, and bolsters. So other than the fact that it's limited to a production run of 600 pieces, what makes this knife special? Well, those of you who know sort of the nature of Cold Steel, you know that they're not a manufacturer. They design knives and they market knives, and they find people to build them. This one is proudly marketed as a 100% made in the USA knife. And it took me a little digging to find this, but they are made by Canal Street. They were made by Canal Street. And I can tell you with the utmost confidence that these 600 2015 Ranch Bosses from Cold Steel will be the last 600 like them, because very shortly before the production of this video, Canal Street Cutlery pulled the plug on their manufacturing operation. No longer making knives is Canal Street. which is kind of sad. They were definitely part of the traditional pocket knife renaissance, and they did a pretty good job. Not quite the same quality that we see from Great Eastern Cutlery, and we'll sort of get into that as we cover this knife in more detail, but they did pretty good work, and they were willing to work in modern steel, which is a plus. So we will lament the passing of Canal Street, and I think it might make ranch bosses a little more valuable out there. So let's look closer at what we've got, more closely at what we've got. This is a large 3-blade stockman. I'll give you a little perspective here. This is the Great Eastern Cutlery number 21 Bullbuster. This is the large 4.5-inch sodbuster pattern. And this is a number 77 Barlow. If I set them straight up vertically, you should be able to see. It's a large knife, and it's a pretty thick knife because it's a 3-blade stockman. I think it might even be thicker than the Bullbuster, which has much thicker scales than the liners and covers on the Ranch Boss. But a little bit of a hefty knife. It weighs 3.8 ounces. Cold steel listed at 4.1. I didn't weigh it at that. That's okay. And it is a serpentine or a dogleg pattern stockman. Main blade is a clip. Need to wipe it. 3.5 inches long it is. I just put a nice smear in my blade there. Doggone it. You wipe so it looks nice and you make it look worse. Not good. I know you guys snicker at me about that. Okay, there we go. Nice hand-drawn swedge at the top. Satin finish. Long pull. Nicely done sharpening notch. This is the best ground blade of the three, and it's the largest, which I think is kind of curious. It's almost like they took extra special care with the clip blade, and the sheep's foot and spay didn't quite get the same attention to detail. Then we've got the sheep's foot blade, which is 2.5 inches long, and if you notice, bit of a sloppy plunge grind, not quite adequate sharpening notch. And this is the good side of the blade. I want you to focus kind of on the width of the edge bevel, because that's sort of like a witness for the flatness of the grind of the blade. You'll notice here on the mark side, get a big variation in thickness of the edge bevel. The blade's kind of wavy on this side. This is how we know that these were not made by Queen, because the wavy side of the blade is the mark side, not the pile side. There you can see that waviness, and the sharpening notch was not quite where it needed to be on this one. A little flare at the base there. But overall, a much better ground S35 VN blade than you see Queen do in their modern steels. Now let's take a look at the spay. Very much the same as the sheep's foot. The mark side of the blade a little bit wavy, a little thick at the base. But overall, you know, not Great Eastern Cutlery, but pretty doggone good. The thing is, objectively, if this were not a limited production knife that's never going to be made again, would it be worth $175, $180, $190, $200? Probably not. Let's take a look now at the outside of the knife. The bolster to cover transitions are pretty good, about the same level that we see with the GEC. Just a couple catchy corners, like 2 out of 8, not bad. As we move to the edge of the knife, we don't quite have the precision in coloring and finishing and truing everything up around the edges. We'll see with the Great Eastern Cutlery knife. As I move my thumb across the spine, I can feel the transitions between back springs and aligners. And I think when open, yeah, I've got some definite below flush back spring condition going on here. I'm going to try to get this shot for you. If you look, the main blade is open. Look at the other back spring on the right. In the front of that back spring, there's almost a little chunk, a little slot cut in it. Don't know what, don't know how that mistake got made, but that shouldn't be. There's some other little tool marks or clamping marks if you look around the knife. Just, not quite perfect or perfection to the level that you'd expect or desire in a pocket knife you paid this much money for. Let's open everything up and get you a look at the blade well. And here again, I have not, this knife is basically new. Hadn't really been used by its owner. It was in for sharpening. I didn't get this dirty and I didn't clean it. So this is kind of how it comes. Let's kind of compare that to the blade well of this number 21 Bullbuster. Everything's just more nicely finished and cleaned on most Great Eastern Cutlery offerings. This is a, $60 knife? So approximately 1/3 the price. Like I said, Canal Street did pretty good work, but not quite GEC level work. How you guys like that bomb shield? Isn't that gorgeous? Here's sort of another thing that caught my attention. You wouldn't know this unless you sharpened a lot of knives, but I sharpened quite a bit of S35VN. And the factory edges on these particular blades were pretty out of whack. They needed some sort of major reprofiling, which is unusual for a thin bladed traditional. But so I did use my 120 grit diamond plate to true these edges up. And I noticed something I've never really seen on S35VN. On this clip blade, when I changed sides and went to put a few strokes on the second side of the blade, sharpening it, it had rolled up a burr right here in this belly area that was, I don't know, maybe over a 1/4 inch long and over a 32nd of an inch thick, like a little ribbon that fell off after a couple strokes. I have never seen S35VN throw up a burr like that. I mean, I've never seen AUS6 throw up a burr like that. So I have some doubts about not necessarily whether these are actually S35VN blades. I can't believe they'd lie to us about that, but I have some serious concerns about either the heat treating process or the grinding process, or both. So if any of you guys have these and have done any cutting with them and have some at least anecdotal evidence about edge retention, I'd kind of like to hear them, because I have sort of grave doubts about that, just based on how this steel reacted to my sharpening stones versus other S35VN steel I've sharpened. But let's face it, most people who buy these are buying them for their collections. And the world may never know. let's see. Am I signing up to buy one of these? I know where I can get one. They're not sold out on one of my favorite sites, collectorknives.net. Is this going to be one of mine? Guys, I don't know. I'm on the fence, to tell you the truth. It's a lot of money for, let's say, a little better than average built traditional pocket knife, regardless of its 3 S35VN blades. That's one of sort of the myths of the knife world. You know, super steel makes a knife cost so much more. For those of you who are paying attention, in my interview video with Mike Stewart at Bark River Knives, he told us how much he pays for a pound of Elmax. And I think also S35VN. I believe he told us that he buys Elmax for $20 a pound and S35VN for $17 a pound. Now granted, you've got more involved heat treating processes with some of these super steels as well. But if this knife were not the Cold Steel Ranch Boss with S35VN blades, if it was the same stockman in a Canal Street marketed knife, what would it be? $75, $80? So is there $100 more S35VN steel in here? No. There's not even a quarter pound of steel. So let's say it started with a half pound of steel before grinding and machining and all that stuff. Well, that's $10 worth of steel in this knife versus $2 in a normal stockman. Let's say the heat treat costs $20 more. Okay, we're still nowhere near 100. Our perception as collectors and users adds exponentially to the value of going to a higher level steel. That's because we're suckers. Just thought you'd like to see this and get the unvarnished truth as I see it. Would it still be worth buying for collectors? Probably so, because it is a pretty well-made knife. It is unique in the fact that in 2015, I don't think you can buy a lot of production traditional pocket knives with S35VN blades, and it's never going to be made again. Could be quite a history marker in your collection. That's all for this one, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and this here ranch boss are sharp.